Right, everything I'm going to say here is probably nothing new because it came in force on the 25th of May, and you should probably be very familiar with all this. I'm sure this is not the case. We got a lot of emails just before the 25th of May on data protection, which we all acquires to without necessarily looking into, but are we actually following the legislation? Well, what we have to know is that there are some national laws, and above those there are some European regulations that are imposed upon the different countries, and it's up to the different countries to strengthen this with their own national laws. Why is it a topic that I'm interested in? Well, I come from a small country that is kind of sandwiched between Belgium, Luxembourg, and Germany, and therefore we have patients coming from the three countries, and also our associates, our employees, our labs come from all over the place, and therefore we had to follow the rules of the different countries, and we are happy that it finally got harmonized. Also, with the clinic that I took over from my father, we now have 35 years of patients' data, and we had to secure everything. I was a little bit worried, and so I was very pleased that the regulations came in force, and I'm going to give you some links. I'm going to accelerate a bit. So personal data, what does it mean? Well, name, first name, anything that would allow us to identify a person. But there's others as well that you may not think about. Everything to do with what websites you look at, when you look at it, geolocation as well. Even here altogether, you'll see that on Facebook, you'll have friends requests, for instance, because your mobile phones met, and this is actually very important. There are 4 sensitive types of data: health, or healthcare, where you practice. If you're in non-compliance here, this is where they will be the most stringent. So health data, where there's the patient data, the anamnesis, X-rays, photos, and so on and so forth. You constantly generate data without knowing. So we take photos here at the Genius Summit. You're going to send those on Facebook. Charlie's going to be happy. You're going to get likes. Charlie's going to share. You'll get 100 shares. And all this is stored on one of the biggest clouds of Facebook. And what happens is that you trigger a photo where you take the photo, the number of likes, who liked, where were the people who liked you or the photo. Who works on Gmail, Hotmail? Who has Gmail or Hotmail for their professional address? Could you raise your hand? So a professional Gmail address on which you communicate with your patients. This is also something that's at stake. Maybe you heard about the GAFAM. It's basically because of them that the smallest players have to follow all these European rules. Google, Amazon, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft with Hotmail. Instagram and WhatsApp are also in the Facebook cloud, and they're stored in the Facebook cloud. Yeah, I put your name to have a laugh. And then on geolocation, I'm sure it's all you have it on, but some people go running. So people in Paris like running along the Seine. It has its weaknesses. This is the world map of runners using Strava, the application Strava. And during the Syrian war, for instance, the smallest GI camps that were completely secret were actually shining in the desert because they were running around their military camps and shining like a beacon in the middle of the desert. So you may use paper diaries, but your patients don't necessarily. And it's really the patients who measure on Google the number of people who come. So, for instance, on a Thursday, you can see here you have a peak at 5. And you can test this for your clinic. You go to Google, look for yourself, and see when you're the busiest. So they store the data for you. It's data analysis. Whether you want it or not, it's there. So data analysis might be a good thing. I'm going to skip this. But there may be some abuses as well. We all know this. It gives you some interesting precedents or some disasters like Brexit. And for medical data, there are some statistics and studies on this, especially in the US. Those that are the most hacked, 12 million, you can see just in 2017 in the US, 73% of that is for medical data that we own or that we store. Some big examples. This is the UK social NHS system, then a dental clinic, same thing, Washington Medicine, University of Medicine. This is for oncologists, and every time it's these people are demanding ransom. If you have a Gmail account, this is an example of what to do and what not to do. So, say you see Dominic, you say, okay, I saw your our common patient for data, so you can see all the sensitive data that's passed on in this email, and you share it, and this is stored in Google on their cloud. So there's a tiny bit of security here, confidential mode, and this basically stops Dominic from downloading the panoramic, and he's got 2 weeks or 1 week to download it. It will still be in the Google sphere, but there you go. We always talk about secured emails. What does it mean? Well, a secured email that you should be using is an email who's crypted, and you need a password. It's up to you to see how you pass on this password. You can send a second email that is not crypted with the password. Sorry. Another example, an associate who sends this, well, what would you do? This is done over WhatsApp. This is before the 25th of May, by the way. Today, there are lots of softwares on facial recognition. And I hope this is not somebody who's going to be a problem in 15 years' time, but we shall see. No, but more seriously, I don't think this is an exaggeration. I think that you are treating, or one of your colleagues are treating the next French presidents. They also go through orthodontics treatments, and they can be they can come at you very harshly if the photos are lost. So there should be more transparency and control for patients, more uniformity in the 28 countries, one single stop shop for all patients called the CNIL, where complaints are directed to. I'll give you the website. Reinforced sanctions, very high fines. The right to forget. Well, there's an example of a Spanish teacher who gone bust 2 years ago, and so he was referenced as bankrupt, and he couldn't find any patients. He went to court and he won, and so you can be unreferenced thanks to the CNIL if you're in Google, for instance, and there's bad things about you. And the last thing is that the patient can ask for their patient's file, and you have a bit of time to prepare it. The role of the orthodontist, well, what does it mean, data treatment? There are 3 main pillars. Data collection, it has to be legitimate and justified. Storage, how do you store? Is it secured, or are you an open book? And transmission, which is the trickiest when you send the data. So for collection, I'm not going to be too long, but these are the 4 main pillars for which we collect data. So the first appointment, ongoing patients, subcontractors, and employees, and you need consent forms, even if it's a problem. And I would suggest that you make amendments with your covenants with your employees, because if you don't have their agreements, you can't even have their bank details. So those who don't say anything don't necessarily agree. It's not because you haven't explained it to the patient that the patient doesn't have all the rights. So in the consent form, you should repeat everything that I've just said, and also the 5 items where you remind them of their rights. It has to be part of the consent. This is all available on the CNIL. On the DPO, this is Data Protection Officer. So agreement between the subcontractor and the doctor. So that means, for instance, the lab, where you share names, for instance, those who make your plaster casts. They have to sign saying that they are GRPD compliant. Storage, there's no level of security imposed by the European legislator, but wall password, you have to prove that you were not, you didn't neglect security. I don't know if you have the shared national file in France, but in Luxembourg we have one, but it doesn't work very well. In Belgium it does exist. It's the ENS box, and UFOP has actually made reference not to send emails, unsecured emails, but to use ELS box instead. There are other solutions, sending CDs, sending USB sticks, and the cloud solutions as well, with passwords. The CNIL, and this is for France, they can help you along. It's very well done, how to protect yourself in 6 steps. You will find this on their site. This is very well done. So the person responsible for the treatment is you, the owner of the clinic. You have to have a data protection officer. It can be yourself as well. And you can delegate to the person who does more admin tasks. So you don't necessarily have to work as the DPO. You are the manager, but you can delegate this task. Then you have to map all the data management, so collection, storage, and transmission. Then you have to prioritize the actions, risk management. Then, how do you calculate all that? If you lose an X-ray, for instance, is it serious? Yes. Should you irradiate the patient again to have the same information again? How do you deal with this? Is it reasonable that this should happen? Well, it's not likely. Even if it's not available straight away, you should have backup.
Serait de 8 sur 16, on est quand même dans le rouge, mais priorité, c'est pas
So priority is not red. So organize the process. It means describing, if only in just one sentence, what do you do it when what do you do and what you do with the data. So these are the sanctions, which are extremely hefty. It's a bit scary. You have 72 hours to notify the patients concerned and notify the CNIL office. In the case of negligence, you risk 4% of your annual income, or 8 to 20 million. Well, we as professionals would be in the 4% category. You can find all of the information on the CNIL website. You have no obligation for results, but you have an obligation to provide the means to the end. So you should inform everyone at the office whether it's justified for them to send documents outside of the office before they do so. As person in charge of the office, this is the list of things that you should ensure. And what does the data protection officer do? They should alert in case of a problem. And this is the CNIL officer who may intervene following a complaint on the part of a patient spontaneously. And the proper advice here is that the assistant says, I'm not the reference person, we should check this with our DPO. And so you save time, and from the procedural point of view, you're okay, and she's not allowed to give outside information, and that is the first test they do. This is what UFOP said, so don't send your x-rays. UFOP is the Belgian association. There are a few represented here today. So thank you for your attention, and